Well, welcome back to Retire Repurposed. Today, Ben Taatjes concludes our decision-making framework with crucial steps for evaluating your retirement choice. Learn how to identify alternative paths, test your decisions before committing, and properly assessing risk. Whether you're on the verge of retirement or planning just ahead, these final steps will help you move forward with confidence. Join us as we complete this comprehensive approach to making your retirement decision. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, welcome back to Retire Repurposed. I'm your host, Jared Sebesto. We got another great show on tap for you today. This is going to be part 2 on making major life/retirement decisions. If you are new to the show, just get ready because we're going to talk a little bit of a different language here today. Life and retirement, how they intersect. Occasionally we talk about retirement plans, and we certainly don't really get into the tactics of that, but we will talk about finances at time. But this is really about your life and your retirement. So if you are just retired, been retired for a couple of years, maybe approaching retirement, eyeballing retirement a year or maybe upwards of 5 years down the road, you certainly come to the right place. And I think that you are going to find a lot of value out of today's show. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show now. And Ben, last week we talked about part 1. Again, decision making, doing it the right way. And there's probably not a bigger decision. Well, that's maybe not be true, but this is a big decision. To retire, you get one shot at this. So this is a big one that a lot of people will have to tackle at some point.
Yeah, it's a huge decision, right? And it is one that typically we do once. I've had people make that comment. They're like, "Oh man, I decided to retire and I kind of failed retirement. I shouldn't have retired." So it's not that you can't go back to work and find something if you retired and found out that lifestyle wasn't for you. But boy, wouldn't it be nice if you had made the decision and you're walking into retirement and it was exactly what you thought it would be. In order to do that, right, you got to first make this decision to do it. But I would say even a precursor to this decision and the framework that we're talking about, Jared, I would tell somebody, listen to a number of our past podcasts on purpose and meaning, how meaningful work is important. Google retirement and purpose, and you'll find very little, actually, surprisingly. But if you look back at our 200 plus episodes, you'll see we talk about this all the time, right? How important purpose is. So again, that's a pretty common thing. People make the decision, realize that, man, I shouldn't have quit or I shouldn't have retired. They go back to work. I'd much rather somebody use this framework that we're going to talk about and finish today, and then make sure that they address the non-financial side of retirement. So that way, that is a decision you make once, and your retirement is exactly what you want it to be.
Yeah, you step into it kind of, clicking on all cylinders, so to speak, and you don't maybe spend time, or I don't want to say waste time, but waste time, trying to kind of flail around and really figure it out. Is there a time perspective? Like, when should people start kind of this process before they retire? I know it's probably not like exactly 365 days, but give people a little ideas to how much runway they need to really hit this all gunslinging, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's years, not months, Jared. It is not months. This needs to be something, in fact, midway through your career, I think people should be thinking, okay, what does this look like for me? And the reason I think that is the decision on how much, even from a financial standpoint, money you're saving early on is part of that decision. Right, and we talked in several other shows about life deferral and why, man, sometimes we almost save too much for retirement, and then we get there and it lets us down, and we should have done more with our families while in those working years when we had higher incomes, not defer all that money, but actually spend some of it. So the decision is a life decision throughout your whole life. I read the Bible, and there's nothing in there that says at 65 or at 72 or 67, whatever the age that you think, either the government tells you or some friend of yours told you it's time to retire. That means nothing to me. Sure. Life is it. We all have different scenarios. We all have different reasons why we may want to not rely on a paycheck. I think that's really what retirement is, as simple as it can be, it's a decision to no longer rely on your paycheck. Your money's going to now work for you. Hopefully you've saved. You are going to have a part-time job. You're going to find other ways to find purpose, all important things. And that's part of the financial planning that we do every day. But here today, I want to make sure people hear, yes, that decision has been part of your mindset for years. Right. Just don't let the government, don't let neighbors, friends, anybody but yourself and your family, your spouse, figure out when the time is right, and take months, right? Not months. Take years, not months.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that retirement really is just kind of the next natural stage. It's not like this massive breakup where there's a stark contrast. Life should continue to grow on. You should continue to be growing. You should be continuing to step into your purpose. It's a natural continuum. And to your point, if you view it as now I'm just not really working for a paycheck 9 to 5, but yet your life is still going on. You're still, you're doing all the things that we've been teaching and preaching. That's really at the essence. If that's what it is, it'll turn out great.
Yeah, you're doing more of the stuff that you want to do, probably less of those things you don't. So it looks like your job, and that's part of that decision we walk through our clients is, okay, best day at work. Think of your very best day at work. What was it? It's almost never payday, right? Yeah. It's almost always that day you impacted somebody. You're able to do meaningful work. So how do we continue that into our retirement years? Yeah. And then it's, do I need that paycheck? Have I done a sound financial plan to replace the income, the regular repeatable income, the spendable side of money, right? And then that's something we do all the time. But I think it starts here with once you get, it is time for me to retire. It's getting very serious, and I think there's reasons for me to do that. Then you start with this process that we started last week, and we're going to continue today.
Yep. Let's do some quick review. Just one more point to that, and I was thinking about this. People are thinking about, they want to get rid of the negative, but they don't think about the things that they want to step into. It becomes just about I just don't want to work. I'm tired of it. I'm burnt out. I'm just hanging on for the next 2 years to retire. But their mindset is really just on releasing the negative, but they're not walking into that positive.
Yeah, don't go from, you're not retiring away from something, you're stepping into something new, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. All right, so last week on the show, we covered the first 4 steps of the 10. We're going to cover 5 through 10 today, but just really quick, maybe in the next 60 seconds, Ben, let's give people a review of those first 4 steps.
Yeah, sure. So step 1 is pray. I'm a believer, and I think people should go to where we do find wisdom, and God promises us to provide that. James 1, 5 through 6, if anyone lacks wisdom, you should ask God. So again, pray that James 1,
before
5, 6, before you even get started. Yeah. Step 2, define the decision. What's the actual decision that I'm making here? Is it to retire? Is it to move on? Is it that you got to, again, define what you're deciding to do? Clarify your objectives is step 3. What are the decision criteria? What am I actually, the objectives that I'm trying to accomplish here? Step 4, you're going to prioritize those objectives, right? Decide what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that I'm not willing to trade off? And then we get into step 5.
Yeah. So let's, again, before we get into that, if I had to summarize the first 4 steps, it's kind of the pregame. Would that be a fair statement, where you're really laying down the foundation to get super clear? Would that be a fair statement?
You're clarifying the decision and objectives, and then you're going to prioritize those. So really, it's a way that sometimes people come in and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, work is this and that about work. I'm like, are you deciding to leave your job or to retire? Those are different decisions, right? So again, you're clarifying what you're really deciding, and then you're clarifying your objectives. For that person that's probably going to leave their job, or they're thinking about that, there's other alternatives there. That's what we're talking about today. But many times it's, well, I have to retire. Well, maybe not, right? And that, I think, is very important. That leads me right into 5. Yeah. That's the step 5 is identifying the alternatives. Sure. So if you've clarified objectives, you've decided, right? You've defined your decision, you've clarified objectives, you start to prioritize then, what are the alternatives? So for somebody who is coming in and they have decided it is the decision to retire, not retire, and one of their objectives is more time with family, right? And they need to be able to be more flexible so that they can spend more time with grandkids, and their grandkids are on board. They want to do that. Well, one of the alternatives might be to go part-time. This may sound simple, but that the reality is many employers really value somebody that is in their 60s, if they're a good employer, that is, and they're like, man, you've got all this wisdom, and really mentoring some of our younger people is really important. Could you move to part-time?
No.
Hey, by the way, now you're 65, you can move over to Medicare and be off of our health insurance. It's a lower cost employee, right?
I like that.
And let's go ahead and move to part-time status, off health insurance, get on Medicare, and then I'll highlight this today again. I did last time. Arthur Brooks, Strength to Strength. If you're in that age group, if you're in your 60s, you probably shouldn't be doing the same thing you were doing in your 40s and 50s. Okay, so look at kind of reworking your job to take just the parts that you still like to do. Right, so that's an alternative. Another alternative would be just to change jobs altogether. Right? And find a new job that's more flexible. It is hard to stay with your same job. Yeah. We know that. I think that is one of the things that people would miss, and I've seen it play out where they're like, yeah, I'm going to move part-time. And they don't like the part-time feel of not being fully vested. That can be a challenge. So again,
might be easier just to go to a different job.
Exactly. To find something altogether new. Yeah. An alternative might be just volunteering. Right, going out and doing something totally different there. Again, I don't want to list everybody's, all their alternatives, but you need to consider what the alternatives are to your retiring or other major life decision. Alternatives give you power, right? When you're not just stuck with a deadline, you're not stuck with a yes or no answer. When you have alternatives, or you can be a little bit more innovative in how you think about your life, that's what you need to be thinking. Yeah,
I call it dichotomy thinking. I teach and preach that a lot with people. We get ourselves into we back ourselves into a corner when we say it has to be this decision or this decision. Well, that's a pretty big decision if you're eyeballing retirement. I'm going to stay at a job where I really am not, there's not alignment there. I may be burnt out. Maybe I'm not valued, versus like quitting my job and thrusting myself into retirement. Those are pretty big options. And if we just create two options, dichotomy will tend to always bring us into smaller ways of thinking. So again, to your point, consider other options, put other options on the table, and that opens up the door for new ways of thinking, and maybe you're able to solve a problem in a much better way.
Yeah, maybe you say, yeah, I'm going to not just say, it's not no, I'm not going to work anywhere. It's just, hey, I need a break from this particular job. I need to make a change. Yeah. Does that mean I retire? No, my other options are fill in the blanks. If one of them is finding a new company, maybe you roll into a new position. Yeah. That's perfect for you.
Better, right.
And then you start loving that position, and you get kind of this second act there, something that you can then really enjoy for a number of years. And it's very flexible, allows you to meet all those objectives we talked about in steps 3 and 4. And you're not taking away from family. You're actually making everybody's life better. So, and that's the option to continue to work or to do something. And some people do. They say, "Hey, my decisions are to retire then, and it didn't work out with another job. That's fine."
And then they know.
They know. Yep. They've at least looked at all the possibilities. And when they decide to make the retirement, they don't think, oh, man, I should have thought about this more. Yeah. No, we always want alternatives. We always want to be, not thinking in, just two dimensions, yes or no.
It also takes some of the pressure off, too, because these are big decisions. And if you only have two, man, it's like one or the other. One's right, one's wrong. It's not the case. What's the next step?
So next step is you're going to evaluate those alternatives. So what are the facts relative to the alternatives? So in that example we were kind of walking through is, hey, here's my simple facts of continuing to work for another company. The way it's going to pay, my flexibility, et cetera. So again, you're just looking at each of the alternatives, listing them out, and putting together what those facts are for each of the alternatives.
Nice. So this is kind of a process. Let me ask you a question. Like, is this like, should people be sitting on this for a while? I mean, can they bang this out in 5 minutes? Like what, how long should each of these steps like this one take?
No, it's going to take time, Jared. This is, again, not a week decision. This is should go on the actual decision process more than a day, more than a week, probably more than a month. I mean, this is a lifetime. You've been working for 30 or 40 years. It is not something that should just happen overnight. So you're going to gather, right, all of those alternatives, and let's say that there's 5 or 6 of them. Now you're going to evaluate those alternatives and gather all those facts. So I would tell somebody to list out, here are the must-haves, here are the want-to-haves, right? And they should be factual. Like, this is not just an opinion, but this is the truth of this decision. And then I would also weight those if you want to get really, I'm a numbers geek and I like, a spreadsheet or two. So I'm not saying you need to build a spreadsheet here, but if it's a big enough decision, that might help. Then rank on a scale of 1 to 10 of how well do these different alternatives meet my objectives. So there's ways to go about this, Jared, that if you do the work and you exhaust it, once you've made that decision, you're able to rest easier. Again, this may seem like overkill to some people listening, like, man, I'm just trying to make a quick decision on I'm a bad decision maker, Jared. I've always struggled with that. And what helps me is, the old pros and cons list.
Yeah.
This is just a kind of pros and cons list on steroids. It's a pros and cons of a decision, but actually gives you a meaningful result. That when you're done, you can save this and go back and say, yeah, if it didn't work out exactly as you thought, oh yeah, that's why I made the decision, and remind yourself of that over time.
Sure. How much like your gut comes into play here? Like, I know, we've prayed about it, right? So hopefully there's like a little bit of, spiritual wisdom at play here, but like what have you seen? I know you're pretty, you're pretty like by the book. Like, how much feeling comes into this?
Your gut doesn't think. Right. I mean, this is all brain decision, and maybe it's a heart decision, right? I look at it and say, if you're doing this process right, throughout each of these steps, you open this out. Remember step 1 with praying for wisdom. I think if you're open on each of these steps to God's leading, praying for open and closed doors. I've always done that in my decisions. It's open the doors I'm supposed to go through, close the ones I'm not. If you're doing that, I wouldn't call it a gut, but you're going to feel led one way or the other. I think it's biblical. God's going to help us do this. I'm not saying He's going to help us make every right decision, but He is going to provide wisdom. This is you getting that wisdom, right? That's all we're trying to do, is say through a process, you can find and not just, hey, I'm just going with my gut here. Right. I've never liked that. Yeah. Hey, I'm just going with my gut. My gut says it's one thing. I think what that tells somebody is that you didn't do your homework, right? I think our brains make decisions through process and through prayer. So I think if we're going to make a big decision, it better not be just, it's a gut feeling.
Yeah. What step are we on? 7 or 8?
So we're moving into 7.
Gotcha.
And that's the first like actual preliminary choice. So now you've weighed out all the decisions. You've been through step 1 through 6, and you have a first decision. Okay, so you make the decision to retire. You make your decision to move on to a different job. Okay, that's not your final decision. That's I've made the decision and I'm going to sit on it. I'm like, yep, this feels right. Here's why. Give it a little bit more time. Okay, this isn't months of time, but at least you need to write it into your matrix that you've been working on and say, this is the decision I came to. Kind of review all those steps and how you got there, and sit on it for just a bit of time. Yeah,
like kind of like commit to it in your brain without actually like putting in your 2-week notice, kind of like that.
Yeah.
See how it feels?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this all started, right? I mean, I helped a guy named Jim way back when I first realized how big of a decision retirement was. To say, hey, you can retire financially. And it's in my book, Repurposed. If you'd like a copy, get a hold of us, go on Amazon. But I made that advice to just yeah, you can retire, go for it. Why wouldn't you? And he made a quick decision. I guarantee you he did not walk through these steps, nor did he say, yep, I'm going to test this decision. Right. Yeah, and step 8, Jared, I'm going to move right into assessing again the risks with that decision. So I've made my preliminary choice, right? I'm here in my mind. What's the worst possible thing? What's the best possible scenario? So I'm assessing the big risk here with that decision. So I'd go back to my client that I told to retire early in the book Repurpose. I said, just go ahead and make the decision to retire. I think you're ready. He retired. Financially, he was. Mentally, he wasn't. We did not assess the risk there.
Sure.
We did not say, okay, what if you have this feeling of lack of purpose? What if you actually have the activity from your day job, the physical demands that are put on your body and your work are gone? What will that do to your health? How likely is it that those risks are going to happen, right? All of those things didn't happen. So we made the decision. He made the decision and he just ran with it. I would make that preliminary decision and then I assess the risk.
Sure. That's interesting. So like, again, this is great steps and they really, really start to, I think, hone in on what that is. And by the way, just caveat, like you still haven't made the decision. At what point are we actually making the decision and doing it?
Step 9.
Okay. Perfect.
And it's a 10-step process.
I didn't know.
Eventually we're going to get there, Jared. It's like, man, what goes on in this guy's mind. But I think, again, this decision-making process that I just walked through, it's not something I came up on my own. This is not something that we developed here. It was developed, as I talked about in our first show, in the 1950s by the Rand Corporation. NASA uses this in their decisions on, sending people to the moon. Okay, so is this overkill? Maybe. You could probably say a few of these steps make sense for a retiree or other major life decisions. But my goal in walking through all 10 is to tell people you can't just go with your gut. I don't want anybody. I said when I gave that advice to Jim, that was the real person, fictional name in the book. I will never give that advice again. So flippantly say, well, if you can retire, you should. That is not a flippant decision. Retirement is a decision that needs maybe not all 10 of these steps, but at least half of them.
Yeah.
Because if you do not make the decision with alternatives, with the pros and cons, and think about the impact it's going to have on your life, on your family, on the community, on your impact on people, I think you're really going to struggle after having made the decision.
So step 9 is actually make the decision, retire, stay, switch jobs, whatever. And then what's step 10?
Step 10 is, again, you're sitting, you've tested it. Yeah. It's saying, okay, I think it's kind of step 10 says, I'm going to test the decision yet again. Now you've made it. You've given your 2-week notice and you've moved on.
It's not over.
It's not over.
Right.
Your life's not over. You now are not working at that company anymore. But does that mean that, oh man, I made the decision to retire, now I'm out of the workforce forever, or I'm, my life is, no, you are then able to process.
Yep.
I love the idea of taking a Sabbath season, right? Even if you come out and retiring to something's important, Jared. I always say, don't just leave the job, go into something else, but don't do it the next day.
Sure.
Take a rest, take a time to really search for that next thing. Yeah. Maybe you had an idea of what that could be, but you still need that time to rest. And a lot of people find that they do, what happens is they do a lot of these projects, things they were looking forward to, and then they're like, oh, 6 months went, and now what? Yeah. So that last step is you're kind of feeling your way through life then, right? You've made the decision. Now you're just testing it. And if you've made the wrong one, realize out there to our listeners that if you're in your 60s and you made the decision to retire too soon, there are tons of people that will value your wisdom, your knowledge, and your expertise. You just have to find the right group, somebody that's going to really do that. I think that's what I've been amazed in working with retirees for now over 20 years, Jared, is that they are incredibly talented. They are full of wisdom. Sometimes a little too shy with it and hold it back. Like, let's let the younger generation do it. I'm convinced the actual future for us is not our young people. It's our young people mentored by our older people. Because when I look at the wisdom, the knowledge, the abilities, I would say I don't want to step on young people's toes, but people that are in that age group, there was a right or wrong. There was truth. Your kids may need to hear that from you today. They might need to hear you say, you know what? The stuff that I'm hearing about going on in schools, the stuff I'm hearing about, in the media, some of the crazy things, you're like, what is going on? You may need to bring that up and be that source of wisdom in your family, in your community.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.